So I got COVID, and over the last 6 days, as I was mostly laying in bed, I thought it would be beneficial to inform myself and do some research about what makes COVID-19 so much more dangerous than other viruses that we're facing all the time. And what I found was quite surprising and shifted my entire perspective on this whole situation. Although COVID-19 is obviously a very serious issue with millions of people dying all around the globe, it is only a symptom of a much larger problem. And that issue is what we are going to talk about right now. And although that may sound very scary, the fantastic news is that the solutions to this greater problem are simpler and much longer lasting than a vaccine. I'm going to break this video down into 4 parts so that it's easier to follow, and I will include all of the sources to my research in the description below. On to part 1. The X factor of COVID mortality. My research rabbit hole began with one intriguing observation. Developed countries have a higher average mortality rate due to COVID-19 than underdeveloped countries. Countries such as the United States, who have more advanced healthcare systems, access to more food, access to cleaner air and cleaner water, have higher mortality rate per million in population than countries without access to all of those things. So researchers are trying to figure out what makes the immune system of someone from an underdeveloped country more equipped to fight this disease than somebody with all of these healthcare advantages. And the evidence is pointing to something I had never considered before. Gut health, aka your microbiome. Our gut microbiome is the ecosystem of microscopic organisms or microbes that live in our gut, made up of nearly 100 trillion organisms such as bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microbes. This ecosystem contains more biodiversity than can be found in a rainforest. And many of these microbes are essential for our bodies to function effectively. Think about that for a second. You've got a rainforest worth of microorganisms in your gut working day and night to keep you alive. That's pretty cool. The microbiome plays vital roles in the digestion of our food, the regulation of our immune system, protecting us from bacteria that cause disease, and the production of essential vitamins. And although we do not yet understand the full extent of the roles that the microbiome plays, modern science has linked our microbiome to pretty much every disease that humans face. From digestive disorders such as Crohn's disease, to metabolic disorders such as obesity and diabetes, to mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety, and a host of autoimmune disorders such as allergies, Alzheimer's, and autism. Now let's pause here for a second because it seems absurd that one part of the body is connected to so many of our diseases. But think about this. Our gut is in charge of processing the food and water that we ingest. The food and water that we ingest builds our entire body. So it makes sense that if the processing of that food and water is going poorly, or if we have poor food and water being processed, then the building of this body will also not be going too well. But the good news is that the opposite is also true. A healthy microbiome means the healthy production of body and brain. Which brings us to the second fascinating thing I learned. Microorganisms are pro-life, not against life. The common narrative in Western media is that we should be at war against microorganisms. TV commercials display animated bacteria, viruses, and fungi as monsters that should be exterminated, even though it is bacteria, viruses, and fungi that are responsible for us being alive. Larger life forms like us humans are built out of these smaller life forms. And it is these microorganisms, like viruses, that are responsible for your biodiversity that has allowed us to evolve and survive all these years. What really blew me away was learning that a virus is simply a little bit of genetic code surrounded by a protein coat. Genetic code are the blueprints to building our cells, and the entire collection of genetic code that creates us as humans is referred to as our genome. And get this, over 50% of our entire genome can be traced back to a viral origin, meaning coming from viruses. This means that throughout our entire evolution, we have constantly been in contact with viruses that our body has been able to synthesize information from and include into our genetic code, making us more resilient to the environment we find ourselves in. That's incredible. Your body is literally able to download information from smaller life forms that is then integrated into our system, aligning us with the world that surrounds us. Similarly to how a computer can download new software to be able to interact with new hardware. This does not mean that you should go out and try to collect as many viruses as possible to make yourself invincible. It does not work that way. But what it does mean is that interacting with the life that surrounds you, such as air, soil, water, and worms, is fantastic for your health. And it also means that our internal microbiome is inextricably linked to the external microbiome, because it is this external environment that updates our internal environment. And that interaction is one of the most important relationships for our survival. Which brings us back to our original question of why people in America who have better healthcare are dying at higher rates than those in underdeveloped countries. And it's because in America, we are royally screwing our external and internal microbiomes. For centuries now, Western medicine has declared war against microorganisms in pursuit of the idea that a sterile life is a healthier life. Although this started from a place of good intentions in 1847, when a Hungarian physician realized that when he washed his hands, the patients he was working on died at a lower rate, we have taken this antimicrobial attitude to such an extreme today that we are poisoning our air, water, and soil, and with that, our microbiomes. And issues like COVID mortality and the catastrophic increase in chronic disease, infertility, and metabolic breakdown in young adults that we are experiencing today are the result. So how is it that we are damaging our microbiome? Well, as triple board certified physician Dr. Zack Bush states, advances in antimicrobial science have led to the extensive overuse of pesticides, antifungals, herbicides, and chemical petroleum isolates, each of which have done unspeakable damage to our crops, soil, water, and air systems. And along with destroying the external environment, tons of these antimicrobial chemicals end up in our microbiomes, where they kill off millions of microorganisms that make your life and my life possible. So how much of these antimicrobial chemicals are we really putting into the environment and ourselves? Each year in America, we are pumping approximately 38 million pounds of antibiotics into animal feed. We put approximately 8 million pounds of antibiotics directly into humans through prescription drugs. And finally, we're burying approximately 300 million pounds of antibiotics into our soil and water systems through chemical farming. Let's zoom in on the 300 million pounds that we are putting into soil and water so that we get an idea of how all this functions and how it is affecting us as communities and individuals. The majority of this 300 million pounds is a chemical called glyphosate, made famous by the weed killer Roundup. Roundup is produced by a company named Monsanto that was recently bought out for $66 billion by a company called Bayer. Monsanto has been in and out of lawsuits for the last 6 years about whether or not their products cause cancer. And although the evidence is building towards the fact that they likely do cause cancer, and more lawsuits are being won against them, the FDA claims not to worry about it because the amount of glyphosate that ends up on our food is under the level that they have deemed toxic. When I researched what it means to be deemed under a toxic level, the FDA says, tolerances are set at levels that provide a reasonable certainty of no harm. A reasonable certainty? What? Like, if it's that hard to know if something is safe to eat or not, isn't it clear that we just shouldn't eat it? And isn't it also clear that if a chemical is able to kill smaller organisms, then it will also eventually kill a larger organism who is made up of smaller organisms? We learned a similar lesson with DDT after World War II when we thought we found a miracle chemical that could kill off all insects carrying diseases, so we sprayed it on a bunch of people and plants, and lo and behold, the people and plants started to die. Through my research, I found studies that said both that glyphosate does cause and that glyphosate does not cause cancer, but what we do know for a fact is that glyphosate kills microorganisms in your gut. And we know the vital role that our microbiome plays in so many different diseases, so yes, glyphosate is bad for us. The glyphosate that is put on our crops not only ends up in our food, but also our soil and water, and we even know that it is now found in the average American's urine. Which should lead to the question, why the hell are we using glyphosate? Well, I am just a 22-year-old who did a few days of research, and there are books written on this topic by experts. So for the sake of this video, I'll give a very simplified explanation, but do not take this as the be-all end-all. It pretty much boils down to the fact that we think we need it for farming, and that our current food system is reliant on massive monocrop agriculture. Chemical farming evolved into the new norm over the last 50 years as a promise for a solution to hunger. It has proven not to be the solution to hunger, but now our job market and way of life is set up for this centralized farming system. Chemical farming is most effective for massive monocrops such as corn and soy, and today the majority of that corn and soy goes to animal feed, which supports our super unstable meat industry. Since these animals are also getting fed very low quality food, we also need to pump them full with antibiotics so that they grow at a rate that is profitable and can survive the horrible conditions they are raised in. And farmers are not the ones to blame, because it is us, the consumer, who keeps asking for these animal products at artificially low prices. And farmers are also not happy with the work they are doing. Farming as an occupation has the highest suicide rate of any job in America. Farmers, the people who are growing the food that we need in order to survive, are taking their own lives because they are under constant financial stressors. Not to mention all of the chemical stressors. The US agriculture industry made just under $150 billion in 2019. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical industry, who only starts getting paid once we are sick, made $491 billion in 2019. That means that we are spending over 3 times the amount of money on medicine than we are on food, when we know that eating good food is one of, if not the best method to guarantee health and the need for no medicine. This system relies on us getting sick. It does not promote a healthy life. If this is sounding hopeless to you, then you are correct. The health system we are currently running is helpless, and the root of it is our broken food system. If we continue down this path, then COVID-19 is going to look like a joke, because chronic disease numbers are going through the roof and men's sperm count is toppling to the ground. It just so happens that since the rise of chemical farming with glyphosate in the mid-1970s, men's sperm count in America has decreased by approximately 50%. Glyphosate is of course not the only factor in that. It has to do with our entire lifestyles, but there is a clear trend we can see. More chemicals and less connection to nature, more disease and less ability to reproduce. And that is just not good. But there is very good news. Systems can change. And without something like COVID exposing all of the flaws in our current way of life, we wouldn't be able to see how crappy things are and how we can fix them. So let's talk about what we can start doing right now to shift away from this old system and to start regenerating a healthy microbiome inside and outside of us. The first thing we can all do is take a deep breath. I know that right now a lot of this seems hopeless, but there has never been more potential to create mass change to a better way of living. We got ourselves into this situation by trying to maximize the speed and output of what we were creating. And we did this by trying to dominate nature. We now understand that that doesn't work. So what we can do is take a new approach. We need to make quality decisions for long-term health that are in line with nature. So the greatest first thing we can all do is start spending more time in nature. The amount of time that we're spending indoors in climatized environments is also affecting our health. We need more biodiversity, which means going outside into the forest is one of the best places we can start. The second thing you can do is start creating a more biodiverse environment at home. Green lawn grass is the third most produced crop in America, right behind corn and soy. And lo and behold, something with such low biodiversity on such a mass scale is contributing to the allergy epidemics that we see today. We need to shift what we think a beautiful yard looks like away from looking like a carpet and towards looking like the forest floor during the summer. Creative tangles of species beaming with vibrant colors. A great way to get started is by planting an organic garden at your house. Not only will you be getting food and great health benefits from interacting with the soil, but you'll also be engaging with food systems and understanding where your food really comes from. And the final thing I will leave you with that we can start doing right now to create this change is support those who are changing the system. This can be done in two ways. Firstly, support the farmers who are shifting away from chemical farming and encourage other farmers to do the same. This can be done by meeting the local farmers in your area and buying from them. Not only is investing in these farmers helping the shift away from this broken system, but eating good food now is also going to save you money on your medical expenses later. It's a long-term investment in your health and the environment's health. Not to mention the fact that the food just tastes really good. The second way we can do this is by supporting the individuals and organizations who are speaking the truth on this topic. I highly recommend checking out Dr. Zack Bush, who is one of the people who inspired a lot of the research in this piece. I will link to my favorite podcast episode between him and Aubrey Marcus in the description below. I'll also link to his website where you can find all the organizations he runs and all the organizations he partners with that are all working on this exact topic. Well, friends, I'm sorry to drop such a heavy topic on you today, but I'm so glad you stuck around to the end because this is one of the most important topics of our time, and we have so much opportunity right now to shift towards a better way of life. If you enjoyed this content and would like to see more like it, head over to our YouTube channel at ANewDream, where my buddy Mitch and I are in search of better ways to live. As always, much love, and remember, choose biodiversity. Be well.